Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Feng, your host, and on this episode, I am triply pumped to have Ryan Noonan and Connor Allen on the show. You probably know these guys as the co-hosts of the Move the Line podcast, a 444 football production, but what you should really know is I wanted these guys on to talk about Super Bowl props this week. Ryan, Connor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Ed. Me and Noonan, a little duo here, bringing the Move the Line action over to the Power Rank Pod. Love it.
Absolutely, yeah, and thank you guys so much for the work. If you do follow my newsletter, you guys know that I often go to Connor and Ryan for sharp action NFL props, and really looking forward to this conversation. Fellows, before we get into the props, I'd really like to know your thoughts about the game. We have a rematch between Kansas City and Philadelphia. Ryan, let's start with you. Any thoughts about the game and any opinion on spread and total?
Yeah, man, I'm fascinated to talk about this game. Connor and I really haven't even dug into it yet. I obviously took in Connor's insane preview that he does every year and has had some success hitting the winner there as well. Also want to give props to my co-host as well. This was his preseason Super Bowl prediction. So
nice.
He landed the plane there. So well done, Connor. But yeah, I mean, obviously we know NFL sides and totals, especially something like this, is as efficient as it gets. It is. I don't model sides and totals like I know you do, Ed. I find it a fascinating journey, I imagine, for this one, because I don't know how you bring in the history and experience of 5 Super Bowls in 6 years with this quarterback and coach duo is, I think, a common and maybe lazy way to handicap this game, but I think it absolutely matters. But how do you bring that in into, curating a number where if you look at just lining these up, these two teams matchup wise, it's just not a lot of advantages that I think Kansas City has over Philadelphia on either side of the ball. But Kansas City, a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. I think the total is fine. Like, obviously we had a 38-35 shootout last time these two teams met. I don't know. We need to extrapolate a ton from that, but I think sitting on the key number makes a ton of sense. I think Philadelphia, just if you're handicapping the game, is probably the right side, but you obviously are going up against all of the black magic voodoo that, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are. I mean, Philadelphia's D limits explosive plays. Kansas City doesn't need them. They don't really rely on them. They don't even try. And when they've tried, they haven't even been really good at it. Does that change now with kind of, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, all those different things? Can Philly get pressure with just 4? They're probably going to sit in a lot of zone. They're not going to allow explosives, and they're not going to blitz. That's probably the right thing to do with Mahomes as well. Can the offensive line hold up? Thuney moving to the outside, I think, is nice, and that's helped solidify things a little bit, but I think it's impacted their running game. Do they even try to run? Can they run here? So in terms of Philly's defense, I think is a pretty good advantage, other than the fact that Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. I think that the Eagles could bully the Chiefs up front with their run game, which I think is going to be an interesting factor. I think that the run game with what Philly likes to do, I think, is so diverse in terms of how they scheme different zone traps. And I think they're going to be able to find ways to be able to get Saquon moving. And we've seen this. Teams try to sell out, bring 8 in the box, and that doesn't really work. That kind of leads to a higher rate of explosives. So Spags versus Hurts is fascinating. Second level rushers from Kansas City and how Hurts navigates that is fascinating. So it's just a long-winded way of saying I cannot wait to watch this football game. I think we kind of continue this run of really entertaining Super Bowls that we've had the last couple of years. I think it's a close game. And I really don't know. I'll have a bet on it because it's the Super Bowl. I just don't know what to do with it right now.
For sure. Ryan, I'm happy to see that you are so excited about this game. I think there's a lot of people out there in America that are like, I ain't watching no Super Bowl between Philadelphia and Kansas City, and they'll boycott the idea for the week and then realize it's the Super Bowl and start planning their parties and get excited for football as they rightfully should. Not that me and my friends would ever do anything like that or say anything like that.
Football winter is coming, Ed, right? Football winter is coming. Exactly. We're about to be on hiatus for 8 months.
Exactly.
Watch the freaking game, bet on the game. Come on.
I think you also bring up a very interesting point about how do you account for 6 years of history with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. One way that I do it is I actually don't eliminate my preseason prior. I think that a little bit of that is baked into there, and certainly my numbers are more edging towards Kansas City because of that. Obviously, an imperfect way of doing it, but one thing that I do in my modeling, and I do think it is an important part of my modeling. Connor, would love to know your perspective on the game in general, and actually tell us a little bit about this insane preview as well, and any opinions on spread or total.
Yeah, basically, as soon as the games end last week, I just started diving in and researching. Look at both sides of the ball, try and find just edges, and then contextualize them. Of like, okay, well, the Eagles are the best running team in the league. How have the Chiefs done against the best running teams in the league? How have the Eagles done against teams that have shown the propensity to try and stop the run or sell out and navigate that? So really, just trying to contextualize every little facet of the game to make it more predictable. As Noonan mentioned, it has gone pretty well. I've done it for now. This is my 11th year. So I picked the winner outright 7 out of the 10 times so far, which is pretty strong. But obviously I unfortunately picked the Niners last year, and I still think that felt pretty good, but whatever. It was like basically a toss up when it came down to it. So in this game though, particularly, I think there's a few keys. So Noonan hit on some of them. I think the 3 keys that I have is the Eagles running game against the Chiefs. I'm really interested to see how Spags tries to combat this running game here. And what gives me kind of hope that he can at least try is, like what he did against the Eagles in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. On paper, this Chiefs defense in the Super Bowl 2 years ago was significantly worse than they are now. And this Eagles offense in 2022 Super Bowl was number 1 in EPA, number 1 in basically every rushing metric. Now, they didn't have Saquon Barkley, and that obviously matters. But the Chiefs came in there, slowed the Eagles running game down to like a halt. I think it was they combined for 45 yards and like 17 carries amongst the running backs. It was not very good. So I think that could be an interesting spot here, is if Spags can throw everything there. And that kind of parlays into the next facet, which is pressure against Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts under pressure this year has been very bad. The Chiefs are 5th in pressure rate, 4th in blitz rate. We know that Spags can dial up just exotic blitzes from different places in high leverage situations. Jalen Hurts this year under pressure, 44% completion rate, 4.9 yards per attempt. It's 19th out of 24 quarterbacks with 375 dropbacks. So the way I envision this game going, at least on that side of the ball, is we're going to see try and load the box or try and bring pressure into different gaps to try and slow down the run. And I think that they have some success on a per play basis. I think Saquon's still going to get his in a long run probably, but on a per play basis, I think that they do an okay job. And then just pressuring Jalen Hurts like literally as much as possible, which is going to leave some gaps behind for AJ Brown, for Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. But I think, again, on a per play basis, I think that's going to be their goal, is to try and cause some chaos in the back end there. And then my third key, how do the Chiefs move the ball? They can't run the ball. The Eagles' run defense has been awesome. The outside receivers are not going to have a ton of success against Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell. And I think Cooper DeJean and Vic Fangio are going to be able to slow down Travis Kelce, and then maybe some CJ Gardner-Johnson, coming down over the top as well. Like the only match of edge that I see really is the middle of the field against Oren Burks, who's allowed 21 of 23 targets to be caught this season. The backup linebacker of N'Kobe Dean went down. That's one guy. Like that's not really enough. You can't pick on this guy for, the entire game. So I'm really going to see that.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask you about that. Ertz had a crazy number of targets for Washington last year against this Philly defense. Are we talking like Noah Gray going off and having a big game?
See, I go back and forth because, I would initially, that's what my inclination was too. Is like, okay, maybe they'll play more 12, but then, when I was looking back at it more, Oren Burks, he plays a full-time player. So they don't really need to play a different personnel to get more Oren Burks. Like he's already going to play the entire time anyway. So you'd much rather have like Xavier Worthy or, I don't know, JuJu or Travis Kelce or someone over the middle, like going at him instead of like Noah Gray. So I think they use maybe a little more Noah Gray than we saw last week, but I think it's probably going to be those guys running like a 3-by-1 and then just like a lot over the middle.
Fascinating. You did mention Kansas City's run defense against Saquon. Obviously, that's an important part of this game. I will only note that over the last couple of years, Kansas City's run defense by success rate has been terrible. They've been significantly better this year, which is pretty interesting to me because it's a lot of the same personnel. They're still not good. They're about league average. And so obviously the explosives are a big thing, and we will see what happens. Connor, I've had you on the show, and you've talked about your process for digging out value in NFL props. You have talked about how it cannot be entirely model driven, and you know, in a lot of the work that I've displayed of yours in Five Nuggets, it's about finding things that are different, finding things that change. So maybe tell us your process about finding value in NFL props and what you can automate and what you can't.
Yeah, and I think that changes throughout the week. So like early in the week, I think there are still some projection edges where you can just take a couple of projections, make an aggregate, simulate them against the market, and find some reasonable edges, or just like generally know that certain players are priced wrong. But later in the week, I mean, markets do a pretty good job in terms of like bettors bet into it, and they adjust, and it becomes fairly sharp in most spots. But that being the case, so like the majority of props, especially the ones that we release, like I had to adapt and find unique edges that aren't necessarily reflected in the market, and always make sure that we have like multiple outs to win. So a lot of that is playing unders, which naturally provides outs via injury, via, again, randomness.
Yep.
But for example, give an example here, like backup running back and wide receiver playing time is like extremely volatile and makes it really difficult to stick to one number on a player because of like the underlying assumptions regarding, route rate or carry share or things like that. So, again, for example, last week we played Pacheco under 33.5 rushing yards. The assumption with the pricing was that like Kareem would be the 1A, Pacheco was the 1B. Pacheco had seen his carry share decrease in 4 consecutive weeks. And there was a report from a good beat reporter saying they were going to ride Kareem Hunt, not Pacheco. So like his carry share could be anywhere from, 10% to 35%. Which is pretty tough to top 33 yards at even a 10 to 20%, even 30%. But again, it makes it really tough to set a good number if his workload could be anywhere from like 4 to 9 carries. So I think it's like kind of betting into that type of uncertainty that provides a bit of an edge, especially if you feel like you have a better read on it than what the market is suggesting, which is the case in this instance. So, and then, circling back to the other, I guess, out here that I was talking about with having multiple outs to win. If the Chiefs fall behind, Pacheco isn't going to play. It'll be Samaje Perine. And then he's been super inefficient. So he's been one of the worst running backs in the league since he came back from his injury. So, again, it's like having multiple outs, trying to look for edges that aren't necessarily factored into the market. And it's not necessarily like the market's like super wrong in a lot of these instances. It's just that it's really difficult with some of these like lesser known guys that aren't playing as much to like factor in that volatility into one number.
Absolutely. Do you find that beat reporter information, like you just mentioned last week with Pacheco, do you find that valuable, and useful?
So Coach Speak Index, shout out to him, does a really good job of kind of parsing through that. I think he basically, filters through everything and talks about how, certain coaches and certain, are more reliable than others. In terms of beat reporters, I take it very, I'm very skeptical, to be honest. Like there's a certain group of people who do a particularly bad job of projecting workloads, especially within, the day of the game and things like that. So I really struggle with that group of people that I don't want to, name names. I don't know who listens to this, but I would just be very careful about that. And just, you got to know you're going to trust with beat reporters, because right now information is wrong, like more than ever, to be honest.
Everyone listens to the show, Connor. So, good to be careful of that. Coach Speak Index, is that a social media account or a site, or
yeah, it's a guy who basically tabulates everything that every coach says and sees how true it is. So like if they're like, oh, we're gonna ride this guy as a hot hand, he takes the next results and then like built a whole database out of it and spent a couple of years doing that, and then went public with it. And now it's like a Discord where he drops it like by team and everything. And there's some super useful nuggets there on a team basis. So definitely would recommend checking that out.
Excellent. Ryan, wanted to ask you, you've been the expert at tackle and assist props. It's a very data-driven process for you, very into the weeds in terms of looking at individual scorekeepers at different stadiums. That seems to have a little bit less of effect on the Super Bowl, but maybe tell us a little bit about your process there and how it's evolved and how it will impact the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so no scorekeeper edge. I've had attempted now for a couple of years to try to get some, boots on the ground, friends that are, in town, or, maybe have some connections to see if we can find some nuanced answers to maybe capture some of this data. But I do think it does matter. It is part of my projection process. I do regress it to the mean over, the season. But I think like anything where we're projecting, I think data at the tails, I think there's a lot of action in that where there could be an edge to be had. So when you look at, a stadium scorekeeper, right? I guess I'll step back a second. Like I always kind of explain it where if you're watching a football game, for the most part, the example I'll use is that a reception is a binary outcome, right? We know that it either happens or it doesn't. So if you're betting on a reception prop, we know the answer. And tackles are a little bit different. They're a little bit more subjective. Technically, they're not even an official stat from the NFL. So like there's definitely some nuance to how a scorekeeper would grade a solo tackle versus an assist. Was, did the runner step out of bounds on his own? Was he pushed? All those different things kind of go into it. And now having done this for 3 years, I think a fairly, because we're dealing with small samples, a fairly actionable sample of, teams that are really stingy with what they give out assist wise and places where they're just very, very happy to give an assist to almost any tackle that happens. So I do think that should be accounted for when making projections. I think also, first of all, very, very few people, if any, are building out tackle projections. I don't think anyone's doing it to the degree where I am factoring in this level of data. Also looking at positional groups versus team stuff too, based on, where teams attack offensively, teams being more subjective to have tackles from a safety or corners or, defensive line. I think there are definitely edges to be building some of that in. And, dealing with small sample, rolling in kind of baseline stats from previous seasons when there's, congruent coordinator from previous years, right? Different role changes and stuff like that. So I feel like every year my projections get a little bit sharper. And that's kind of bared itself out in the numbers. We're, doing this for 3 years to have over basically 11.5% ROI, a hit rate of over 60%, right? These are not guaranteed winners. They lose, but over the course of time, now that we have more books, even though limits can be smaller, sprinkle down a little bit on a bunch of places and get a pretty decent amount down every week. So I do think it is a data-driven edge, but there needs to be a little bit of a softening based off of some of those specific things, whether it's scorekeeper or positional matchup stuff.
How often would you go against your model for tackle and assist props?
Oh, it's a great question. Just like actively against it, very rarely.
Okay.
This is actually a great week to go about it. I think the Kansas City linebackers are overvalued in the market. I think both of Nick Bolton and Drew Tranquill's numbers, at least where they opened, were a little too high. But when you look at what Philly does in their, obviously a run-heavy approach, they are one of the best matchups for opposing linebackers. Almost 29% of all tackles against the Eagles have come from the linebacker position. It's about 1.5% above league average. Doesn't sound like a huge mark, but Philly overall, from a volume standpoint, is significantly above league average as well. So it's about 2.5 linebacker tackles per game above league average. So even though I have Bolton and Tranquill a little bit below their numbers, my projections say there's definitely value in the under. It's not something I'm rushing to bet because of,
Right.
Its game script could be very Philly run heavy. And all of a sudden you're kind of, dead on arrival.
Ryan, you have an insane preview of every single tackle and assist prop. And unfortunately, the market keeps moving in that direction, at least when I checked yesterday. Tell everyone a little bit about that piece of work.
Yeah, I need to update it because more guys have been posted, but basically anyone that's posted, whether it's, DraftKings, Caesars, MGM, FanDuel pre-flop this week. Love FanDuel getting in pre-flop, which is absolutely fantastic. And they're a little bit off market. They definitely are doing their own thing, which has been advantageous on the early side for us. But if you, free to read on the site, 444.com, breakdown of my process, the projection, what the over and under hit rates are, where there's any EV, and then best bets at the bottom. So to, Ed's point, be careful there because there has been some movement, but there's been some other players that have jumped in and there's still some value on the board for sure.
I mean, clearly people are betting stuff based on that article. I mean, it's not, everything is, a lot of things had moved. Ryan, would you be willing to share a Super Bowl prop with us?
Yeah, I'll skip the tackles, but I'll stay where my bread is buttered, and I'll stay on the defensive side of the ball. It's kind of a two-parter here. You can either go just to get a sack or first player to get a sack at some books. And I want to go with Chris Jones here. Chris Jones plus 136 on FanDuel to get a sack. FanDuel and DraftKings, there to get a sack market is basically over under a quarter sack. So basically, this is a yes to a half sack, which again, you and I have talked previously, Ed, about subjectivity around scorekeepers and giving out half sacks or not. I don't know if there's anything to that, but definitely an off-season project to look at. But that's a good thing too. Whereas if Caesars or some other places, it's over a half a sack. So if you need the full-on sack there, but Hurts, his pressure to sack rate spiked this year. Second longest average time to throw in the league. He's held onto the ball for more than 4 seconds on nearly a fifth of his dropbacks, which Next Gen Stats counts as an extended dropback. It's the highest rate in the league, which you see sometimes with these, guys with the ability to extend plays and run and scramble. The Chiefs love to move Jones around, which is just completely unfair because this is a massive human being that should not be able to win off the edge, but he can. But I'm also interested to see matchup wise because we've seen better play from George Karlaftis, Mike Dana, Charles Omenihu. So I think they can keep Chris Jones in the interior and win that way. And that's actually where I think your best bet against Philly is to win up the middle. Cam Jurgens given up 9 pressures this postseason. His PFF pass blocking grade is 26. Is very bad. Landon Dickinson, same, not far behind with a PFF pass block grade of 35. Mekhi Becton, significantly better run blocker than a pass blocker, 8 pressures allowed in the postseason as well. All 3 of these guys in the interior rank outside of the top 40 in PFF pass block grade in the postseason. That's out of 67 offensive linemen that have played at least 20% of the snaps. Chris Jones is a monster. He plays a higher rate of snaps in the playoffs. He's been going to be able to collapse that pocket, get pressure. I'm getting plus money on him to get a half sack. First player to get a sack, I think I've only seen it on MGM, so that's not super fair for everyone that can't really get down. Plus 850. So again, take your $20 or whatever, sprinkle it there at plus 850 on Jones to hit first. Hopefully some other books post that, but I think it's an interesting look.
That would be awesome. Cam Jurgens and Dickerson were both dinged up last week. What do you think their health status is going to be for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, we'll probably get more information on Wednesday when we get some first real practice reports. But their swing guy has not been much better there too. So I don't feel that that's going to be anything that matters with what Chris Jones is going to do in this game.
Excellent. Connor, is there a Super Bowl prop you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, I'm going to stay with it. I already mentioned him earlier, but I'm going to go with Isiah Pacheco under 29.5 rushing and receiving yards. You can find this on FanDuel, widely available 28.5 as well, which I think is fine. He's seen his role decrease in now 5 consecutive weeks, carry shares of 58, 38, 33, 30, 24, and then 15% last week. Just 4 carries to Kareem Hunt, 17. Eagles run defense also played really well, 3.68 yards per carry to opposing running backs. Been top of the board in most other metrics as well. It's pretty bad news for this Chiefs running game that hasn't been very efficient. Pacheco has really struggled again post-injury, and he is in the last 4 games just 20 max out of 25 combined rushing and receiving yards. Last week, I think there's a reason this number has gotten a little bit boosted with the rushing and receiving yards. He finished with 12 yards and 2 targets, but that one of the 10-yard gains came on a play where the Bills were selling out to stop the run. Mahomes did a bootleg and kind of just flipped it out Pacheco in space. I don't think that's super sticky. He's only running a route on around 25 to 30% of plays and gets none of the long down and distance or 2-minute drill snaps Samaje Perine does. So I think we're going to see maybe, 3-4 carries for Isiah Pacheco again, maybe a target. And so in this instance, I think under 30 yards is a pretty good look for Pacheco.
Excellent. And I love that you add in the, the type of play, like the stuff that's not available in the data. And that's probably not sticky. I would definitely agree with that. And I was thinking about this, Connor. If I'm making a line for a sports book, it's absolutely impossible to set the right line for the backup running back, right?
But it's
I wouldn't even know how to do it. I mean, you're just guessing.
Yeah, especially you look at the Bills and stuff like that. Like Ray Davis, randomly comes in and has 6 carries and then 2 carries. The difference between 6 carries and 2 carries is cosmic. I mean, it's just a massive difference in what the median line would be on that. So I don't know. There's I think you can get away with like taking advantage of that sometimes in live betting as well. The books have done a better job, but like you can live bet like backup running back overs or like anytime touchdown if a team starts pulling away and you might see them later in the game. I don't know. That's kind of another fun edge that I've seen people exploit.
Is that something that you're looking at in the Super Bowl?
I don't think that this game is going to get out of hand either way, but if for some reason it does, yeah, I mean, Kenneth Gainwell still hasn't really practiced. Will Shipley would probably see some work if for some reason the Eagles are up by like 30. But which I mean, hey, the Bucks beat the Chiefs by whatever 30 a couple years ago, so you never know.
That was expensive.
Yeah, that was not great.
Yeah. I mean, I was also thinking, I started playing fantasy football this year and with my son, and we were looking at that Denver backfield, and it seemed just like completely unpredictable which of those three guys were going to get carries, right? And if you just think about that from the bookmaker perspective, like, I mean, there's no, I mean, it's almost impossible. Like, I think the right answer from a bookmaker perspective is not to put up a line, but that's really not the attitude of the books these days, right? So, like, I think that's, I mean, is that kind of how you think about it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, they have to set a line because everyone's setting a line. But I think there was 3 or 4 weeks in a row where I was betting just the under on a different Broncos running back and picking the right one because, I mean, no one knew what Sean Payton was going to do really, but there was a few tells here and there where they'd start to work in Estime a little bit more, or, they wanted, one of the other backs in there. And then, like, they never wanted these guys to be truly like a feature guy. So, like, sometimes Javonte Williams lines up to like 40 something yards, which is too high. So I just started taking unders on a lot of these guys. And, like, I mean, occasionally the guy would get like 1 or 2 carries, you know what I mean? It would be like 30 yards below his prop. So it was pretty wild, honestly. I totally agree. The books, if I was a book, I would not have a line, but that's just not an acceptable answer, I think, in today's day and age.
Do you feel like predicting who was not going to get carries is sticky for you?
I think it's something that I've done a better job of. I think the Broncos one was pretty tough. But yeah, I mean, I came out ahead, in the long run. But I would say it's not a good spot to necessarily take overs, but you could correlate like, so if you took Williams under 30, you could parlay that with like Estime 25 plus a plus odds. And then it would be, kind of a correlated parlay in a way that isn't necessarily factored in. So like the books don't always price that as direct correlation. They do the same thing with wide receivers, by the way. So like wide receiver 3 and 4, if you think the wide receiver 4 is going to play more than the 3, you can take like under one player and over the other. And they don't price it like they would like a, I don't know, like other stuff that they price normally as correlation, basically.
Well, I guess they should be positively correlated if one's over and the other's under. Or they,
like the point is like, so like early in the week, or actually last week, so we played Kareem Hunt carries like 10 plus over, and then we played Pacheco under 6.5 carries and parlayed them. And it gave me like, it didn't price in correlation enough, essentially, is my point. It was like, and so it was obviously a very positive EV outcome for us if we were predicting the outcome of like, okay, well, Kareem Hunt's going to see a step up in work and Pacheco's going to see a step back. And obviously they're correlated, in my opinion, again, but the books didn't really price it like that.
That's an interesting thing. One last quick question about Denver. Like, I mean, what about just playing the under on all 3 of them? I guess it depends on the number, but like, presumably one of them.
Well, it was usually 2 of them would get involved, and Sean Payton talked about it multiple times throughout the year. It was usually like he said, like, I don't know, 5 times through the year. He's like, it's pretty easy to get 2 involved. He's like, I'm having a tough time getting 3 involved. So it's usually like Javonte Williams started basically every game. And then if he had like a big run, he would be stick the entire game. If he didn't, he wouldn't play like the rest of the game. And then sometimes he'd bring an Estime or Tyler, the other guy, late in the game to be like their closer occasionally. So, I mean, it's just kind of a mess. So yes, the under definitely the right side, but it's pretty messy.
Connor, is there another Super Bowl prop you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, I'm going to go with an over on a guy who's not typically a guy I'd like to play an over on, but JuJu Smith-Schuster, over 16.5 receiving yards, pretty widely available. He's seen his role grow substantially in the playoffs, 41% and then 63% routes run rate last 2 games. He only ran 4 fewer routes than Hollywood Brown last week, went 2 for 60 against the Bills on 3 targets, despite pretty limited passing volume for Mahomes. I think it's also pretty easy to forget. After Rashee Rice's injury, JuJu was his quote replacement for a little bit. Had a game of 130 yards and 7 catches, got injured directly after that. And now this situation this week is not necessarily comparable given Worthy's ascension, Hollywood Brown's return, etc. But I wouldn't be surprised to see JuJu as a pretty important part of this game plan in the slot. As I mentioned at the top of the show here, I think that the main advantage for the Chiefs is going to be over the middle and using these receivers against linebackers in space. And we actually saw that last week against the Bills. JuJu's big catch came on kind of a slant over the middle, finding space in between the linebackers and then just breaking a tackle there and running. So again, I mentioned, without Nakobe Dean, the Eagles linebacker has not necessarily done a great job in coverage, allowed a lot of catches there. And even Zach Bond, I think he allowed about 8 or 9 catches last week alone to Zach Ertz as well. So I think that Vic Fangio also is going to try and have a plan for Kelce. He may not fully shut him down, but I think that it's going to just leave a lot more Xavier Worthy and JuJu over the middle. And this line is so low that, again, this is one of those things where I can be wrong on a good portion of my handicap and still get there because this is just such a low line here of 16.5. And he's going to play, 50 to 60% of the routes here, or run 56% of the routes. So I think that this could be an interesting one here too. And if the Chiefs have to throw the ball at all, here more, I think this could be interesting with Mahomes getting more passing volume. Again, we've seen relatively low passing volume. So more passing volume from, I think, either side actually could result in some mispriced props offensively on both sides.
You mentioned Zach Bond and the fact that he gave up those targets last week to Ertz. His PFF coverage grade has been great. Do you feel like last week was a little bit of an aberration or maybe something that we can expect going forward?
I think Noonan could probably have a better answer to this. He allowed a lot of receptions last week, but I don't know how sticky that is on a week-to-week basis. I just know that if you're allowing a lot of receptions to Zach Ertz, that you're probably not someone we should be super scared of. So,
what do you think, Ryan?
To be fair to Zach Bond, who again, I love that we're talking. We've had Cooper DeJean conversations. Who's been mentioned here. I talked Chris Jones. So you guys are warming my heart here to talk defensive players. Bond's been one of the best stories in the league. He's actually allowed 5.3 yards per target on the season, the fewest by any linebacker who's allowed 40 targets. They play so much zone and they were sitting in zone. So it gets a little bit noisy in terms of coverage allowed in terms of being the closest guy. He's allowed 50 completions on 74 targets. Again, that's the lowest completion percentage over expectation among that same group of linebackers on the season, minus 8.8% completion percentage allowed over expectation. So he's been fantastic. He allows them, the combination of Bond and DeJean allows Fangio to do so much because, first of all, Cooper DeJean going in the second round, absolutely egregious. He is an absolute dog. He allows them to just stay in nickel and be multiple because they could put Bond. Bond was an edge rusher. You'll see a bunch of snaps from Bond on the edge, and because they can just kind of slide over and use DeJean as kind of a makeshift second, third linebacker to support the run if Kansas City opts to do that. So, yeah, they've just been fantastic and massively important players for them. So, yeah, I think it's just a little noisy with what happened last week. All the stats this season lead to Bond being significantly above average coverage linebacker. Oren Burks, not so much. Small sample, has not been a great coverage linebacker coming up in San Francisco, and I think it's more of the same here. So I do think that they're going to wisely try to find ways to get Oren Burks isolated in man coverage, or at least one-on-one in the zone.
Yeah, excellent. I definitely had Philadelphia. I was high on Philadelphia coming into the season, just with the talent they had. And then you add on top of that you add 2 significant contributors in the secondary in Quinyon Mitchell, and then later in the season, Cooper DeJean. That's a impact infusion that I don't even know how to quantify it, but it obviously matters and is a huge reason why this defense has been so great, right? I don't know. Let's say, what if you had that infusion to the Raiders, right?
Yeah. The ability to be multiple, right? This was kind of like the Pats back in the day. The skeleton key was that Gronkowski was such a great blocker, but that you didn't have to really do anything from a personnel standpoint to kind of dictate and show your hand pre-snap. You could just kind of opt into bringing Gronk, putting him on the line and run, or you could look at the matchups. You can move him in the slot. You can move him out wide. And you really don't have to like dictate what you're going to do based off of your personnel. And a guy like Cooper DeJean allows you to do that defensively in a way because he's so good at stopping the run. He's willing and able to do so. And he allows you to just kind of stay with your base and not really miss anything where it's, a team's going to be like, oh no, they're in nickel, they're in dime. We just need to go ahead and, make them pay for that because they have an extra defensive back on the field. Well, you can't because DeJean is just as good as a run filler as a lot of linebackers are and can obviously match up man on a Travis Kelce or just, a JuJu Smith-Schuster, whatever you want to put in the slot. He's a fantastic football player and massively underrated. So yeah, it helps a ton. It's super important for what's happened with Philly.
He came into the league as a cornerback, right? But he's been playing more of like a safety-like position.
He's been there, Nick. He's been their slot guy. He played both perimeter corner and slot or in safety for Iowa. And he eats in the slot for them. They have Reed Blankenship and CJ Gardner-Johnson at safety and, allow Mitchell and Darius Slay on the outside. And DeJean just, could be your third linebacker or he could be your slot corner.
And that's, I don't know, I mean, that's somewhat different in the NFL, right? Because a lot of these slot corners are tiny dudes that are quick and don't.
Yeah, I mean, smart teams that have the ability to be multiple will just punish you for having that guy in the field, right? They will run at him, and make him, have to support the run. And the fact that DeJean can do all of it makes him just so important, right? Like Brian Branch on
sure.
Detroit,
yeah.
Right? The ability to just kind of be able to put him anywhere. He's going to fill the run, but he's not a liability in coverage. It's such a weapon.
Yeah, and obviously, Detroit is another team that has gotten some massive defensive infusions over the last year. Brian Branch and with Terrion Arnold too. Wasn't the best, made a lot of mistakes out there, but the coaching staff trusted him to put them out there, and I still think he's the reason why that defense took a significant step up this year as well.
For sure.
Ryan, is there another Super Bowl prop you'd be willing to share with us?
Yeah, there are a couple of tackles that I think are still viable. We'll stay kind of in that secondary side for Philly because I do think it's going to be a pass-heavy attack for the Chiefs. And you can still get Darius Slay over 3.5 solo tackles. Now, his tackle and assist line is 4.5. We're basically paying for an assist that we probably won't get. So I want to move to the solo number here. And again, like this is available on DraftKings right now. It's still plus 121. So you're still getting a really nice price on it. If you look league wide, the average solo tackle rate is 60%. 60% of your tackles are solo, 40% get an assist. Darius Slay, a perimeter corner, and you think about this intuitively, I think it makes a lot of sense. Perimeter corners are way less likely based on their alignment to get assists. So Slay, 81% of his tackles this season were solo. So if you're looking at a pass-heavy game plan, even to Connor's point, if it's up the middle a little bit, you're still going to get some perimeter stuff where Slay over 3.5 tackles. I have him for tick over 4, and we're getting plus money on this. So I think it's a really good look still for over 3.5 solos. And my favorite tackle bet it's still on the board in some places, over 4.5 combined tackles and assists on DraftKings at minus 120 for Chamari Connor, the slot corner for the Chiefs, basically playing the Cooper DeJean role that we're talking about. This guy has only been in the league for 2 years, pretty small sample. And it's like, I continue to try to regress this guy's numbers because his baseline stuff just wouldn't make any sense. It feels like an unsustainable baseline rate for a corner. This guy's just got a little bit of dog in him. Like he just likes to get involved. He'll probably only be on the field for maybe 75 to 80% of the snaps. But even if I use his baseline stuff this year at 75% snaps, he's projecting for like 6.5 tackles. So I regressed it a little bit here. I'm still getting like 5.85 tackles for Chamari Connor. So like minus 120 on DraftKings is probably the best number that most people can get down on. ESPN is minus 110. Fanatics, again, really hard for most people. Plus 115. You can sprinkle a little bit of minus 105. I bet MGM. So like you just, open up all the accounts, get a little bit of Chamari Connor over 4.5 tackles and assists. I think he gets, I got him at almost 6 in this spot.
That reminds me, it might be a fun week to open up a Fanatics account. That's put that on
Yeah,
my
your
to-do
wife probably
list.
needs a Fanatics account.
My wife definitely, she is a fanatic about sports betting. All right, Ryan, before I let you go, thank you so much for both of those. You mentioned that tackles and assists are not official NFL stats. So maybe explain that more, and then where the books actually grade these bets.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what that means or what it would look differently, but I've read that multiple times. So I think there's just in terms of like the uniformed way that they grade them, because all they use is everything that books use is anything that's official off of NFL.com. So when you're, sweating these live, don't look at ESPN.
Right.
If you're watching ESPN live,
Yeah.
they will count. I don't know what they even do, but they will also count special teams tackles, which do not count for these bets. So,
Interesting.
yeah, and anything that's official on NFL.com, but apparently it is not a official stat still. So again, I don't know what that would look like if it were to be, but I've read that in multiple places.
Right. The ESPN thing is interesting, especially with college football stuff. A lot of the data is just wrong. Like if you just go look at it, I mean, I think they try to do it themselves, and it is different. The best data sources from the team sites, because that is quote unquote the official college football stats, and ESPN is just wrong. And I've heard people say that about the college basketball stuff as well. A lot of the more quality data services go to the team sites. And I think the same thing applies to here. Look at NFL.com, and that's where everything gets graded. Ryan, Connor, thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode. This was an awesome Super Bowl Props Mega podcast. I'll start with you, Ryan. Please let everyone know where they can find you and all your good work.
You can listen to Move the Line wherever you listen to podcasts. Our 4 for 4 bets on the YouTube channel. Connor and I will have a Wednesday preview, kind of expanding our thoughts on this, along with a Friday prop show. We'll probably get really off the board and a little wild, as you have to when you basically just have one game to handicap. So hopefully people can check that out. And again, we football stops, but we don't. We'll get into the draft coverage here very shortly. Draft props as much as we can, even though it's now banned in Illinois. We'll have to get creative and make sure that happens. But off-season content, coaching changes, all that. Connor and I don't miss a beat in the off-season. So check out Move the Line if you enjoy this.
Tell us about what you do in golf.
BetSportsGolf.com. If you like to get into the weeds on data, our officially licensed PGA stat database, the Rabbit Hole, is without a doubt the best spot for you to build models. If you like to just bet outrights, all that stuff, we have all of that over there. It is just any tool that you would possibly want to be handicapping the PGA Tour. We have over at BetSports Golf. So lots of great ways, cheap ways to do it. Message me on Twitter directly at Ryan Noonan if you want a discount. We'll let you get in there for cheap for a month and just check it out. Big events coming up. We got a waste management this week. Everyone loves that. We got a signature event next week, and the Masters is closer than you think. So yeah, it's definitely a great place to be when football stops.
Connor, Allen, please let everyone know where they can find all your good work.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Ed. Always a good time. Find all myself over at 4 for 4, Move the Line podcast, as Noonan mentioned. We're going to keep releasing random props throughout the week. We talked about it pre-show, but this is the time where they're offering stuff that you can't find on odds screens that are just, very hidden. And we'll probably just shoot them all in our Discord. And right now it's super cheap to get in there. So once again, appreciate you having me on. Always a good time.
Absolutely. Connor, what are you doing the off season? Are you going to be pushing this draft?
Draft, free agency stuff, and then trying to make BetSports Group more money, sell some ads. So if you know anyone looking to advertise on any of our stuff, let me know.
Yeah, maybe the powerrank.com needs to get in there.
Love it.
Connor, tell us a little bit more about your subscription service. You touched on it a little bit at the end there, but tell us.
We release player props, sides and totals. We don't, but we have another capper who does. And then we have NBA props going on right now as well. Our guy Jake Lodenberg is killing it right now. I think he's up 30 something units already halfway through the season, releasing player props with multiple outs. All of our stuff comes with breakdowns. Risk to win, we give 2-minute warnings on all of our props and everything, all released via Discord, so you can get the best number as much as possible. The goal is for our subscribers to be easily able to get down $100+ per player prop. I obviously get down way more. I know Noonan does as well, but that's the goal, is for subscribers to be able to get that at the same number and win. Both Noonan and I think we combined for around 60 units up on the season. So great year. Good to be wrapping up, and appreciate you giving me the platform to give us a little shout out there.
Guys, thank you so much. Just before I go, personal plug for Move the Line, the Wednesday show talking about spreads and totals, and then the Friday show is often something that I will go to look for NFL props to bet, look for stuff for my newsletter, because I don't know, I think these guys have shown for themselves how good their analysis is, but it's definitely something that I go to as well. Ryan, Connor, again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ed.
This is Ed Feng, your host for the Football Analytics Show. Before we end the Super Bowl props MegaPod, let me give you one of my own Super Bowl props. For the last 2 years, I have been using a model to predict interceptions in the NFL. Interception rate is not predictive. You can't just look at a quarterback's interception rate in the past and make an accurate prediction for what's going to happen in the future. You have to go beyond looking at only interceptions. The NFL play-by-play tracks passes defended. These are plays in which a defender gets a hand on the ball. This could be a lineman at the line of scrimmage. It could also be a player in the secondary that gets a hand on the ball. Passes defended also includes plays in which a defender jars the ball loose with a hit. These passes defended are situations in which the quarterback puts the ball in a dangerous situation. These are types of plays that can lead to interceptions. Obviously, when a quarterback throws an interception, he has also put the football in a dangerous situation. What I did was to look at the sum of interceptions and passes defended. I call this sum bad balls, and I found that bad ball rate is really predictive in the NFL. And this is what I use to predict future interceptions. Let's look at Jalen Hurts. He actually has a better than NFL average bad ball rate. His bad ball rate this season has been 11.2%, which is better than the NFL average of 12%. The market expects Hurts to throw about 27 pass attempts. That's not a lot given how they run the ball with Saquon Barkley. You plug this into my model, and it gives a 45.3% for Jalen Hurts to throw a pick. He's not likely to throw a pick. However, the market is shaded towards Hurts to not throw a pick. And in fact, the market is usually set at half an interception. And right now, you can find Hurts at plus 135 to be over a half interception. So that's plus 135 to throw an interception. I'm recording this on Tuesday afternoon. You can find this price at Circa and BetMGM. Plus 135 corresponds to a 42.6% break-even probability. Normally, I'm looking for a model probability that's 5% in excess of the break-even probability. When I've used this 5% edge this season, my NFL interception props have gone 25 and 20, and this is for plus 4.9 units. My model says that there's a 45.3% chance that Jalen Hurts is going to throw a pick. This obviously doesn't reach that 5% threshold, but I do think there is value here. It's definitely a lean for me. I have no idea what price that you're going to find by the time that you listen to this, but you definitely have my number that Jalen Hurts has a 45.3% chance to throw an interception or go over half an interception. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football Analytics Show. This podcast is brought to you by the Power Ranks Sports Betting Newsletter. Looking for some action on any given weekend? This is the free service for you, as 5 Nugget Saturday is my curated list of tips and analytics. Some of those bets are my own. A lot of the other bets come from sharp people like Ryan Noonan and Connor Allen. To sign up for this free service, go to thepowerrank.com. That is my site for better sports betting information through data and analytics. Once again, that's thepowerrank.com. Once again, my name is Ed Feng, your host. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.